Welcome everyone to today's Vita Salon. These salons were founded by the incredible Harmony Scott, who is truly an innovator in creating space for vibrant conversation in the field of sex, love, and relationships. And today's panel is hosted by Elizabeth Dana and myself, Aurora Sunu. And these conversations are a way for us as Vita coaches to engage in meaningful discussion around all topics, sex, love, and relationships from both a personal and professional perspective. So there is a real treasure trove in these sumptuous salons. And today we have a really excellent panel for you to explore some imperative questions when it comes to intimacy, pain, and pleasure. Such important topic for our clients. So before we dive in, hopefully the panelists are going to introduce themselves. We'll popcorn, tell us who you are, what you do, and your why for being here. And Harmony, would you like to start us off?
Oh, thank you so much for that introduction, Aurora. I'm so happy to be here. I am a love, life, and intimacy coach. I am living in Hawaii right now, my childhood home. I've returned after many years, and I work with women, men, and couples to bring the intimacy, the connection, the communication, the healing that they desire to create epic love and to become relationship artists. And part of that is healing whatever sexual wounds, whatever blocks we may have. And that is the topic of conversation today. So excited to hear all your wisdom.
Freya, you're next on my screen. Would you like to share?
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here. And I'm a psychotherapist based in the UK and also a couples therapist. And I mainly work using two approaches, imago, relationship therapy, and tantra. Most of my couples have some kind of trauma and most often have not been having intimacy for some time. So my work is a gentle blend of helping couples into talking about these issues where there is pain, physical and emotional pain that has led them to stop having intimacy and stop talking about intimacy. So it's about having those conversations and then gently encouraging them to build connection and intimacy through dialogue and through tantric practice. Yeah.
Thank you. Marianne, you're next on my screen.
Thank you for having me here today. So my name is Mariana. I work as a psychologist, hypnotherapist, and sex, love, and relationship coach. I mainly work with women, but I also work with men and couples. And I focus specifically on women where they are feeling that they are struggling in the intimacy and the sex. So they're experiencing either pain or they're freezing up or they're feeling blocked. And they would love to experience enjoyment again in the bedroom, in the relationship. And I work online from the Netherlands with women and couples and men from all over the world. And I'm excited for this topic today because it's very important because many of my clients actually struggle with this problem. So, yeah.
Gorgeous. Thank you. Fanny, you're next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. So I'm Fanny Loub. If you want to laugh, that literally means the baker. I am a French physician and I love to call myself a sassy Swiss knife because I am a GP. I work with women in gynecology. I'm a yoga teacher, a podcaster. You know that moment where you're like, I've never been interested in being easy to define. So here's all what I do. But what I do best is to help people step out of physical, emotional, and spiritual numbness. And the best way to actually save hours of self-development books and hours of research on the internet is to address one of the roots, in which is about healing our sexuality. And the best route to do that is to start with our pelvic floor, because you address the root and then you can build something from the ground up. That's why I was so passionate about being in this conversation today.
Wondrous. Okay. And, who's Garisha, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. And my name is Girishandra, and I'm from Hungary. I'm an orgasm coach, trauma, transgenerational abuse healing, and grief recovery specialist. And I've created an holistic Empress O method, helping mainly women. I'm working mainly women, but also working with men and couples to help all kinds of pain and also what we inherited, unconscious patterns, and finding the roots with my holistic method and really liberate and feel more confident in our pleasure and intimacy and our sexuality. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, thank you. And then I think Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Carson. I'm a love, sex, and relationship coach and a pelvic health coach working out of Massachusetts and helping people globally. At my coaching business, Night Bloom Coaching, I really concentrate on supporting women and couples who have experienced really tough reproductive experiences. So miscarriage, stillbirth, infertility, abortion. And a lot of times, painful sex intersects with these experiences, for example, in birth injury. I also help women and couples who are dealing with the effects of major life transitions like menopause. And menopause is another time when pain tends to arise in the pelvis. And so I'm just so glad to be part of this conversation today, because I know that when I was going through pelvic pain, it felt like I was the only one. And to be able to hear all of these incredible experts to talk and both normalize but also heal these problems is just wonderful.
How rich is this? Gorgeous. Have we shared all panelists other than Elizabeth and myself? I think so. Okay. So Elizabeth, would you like to?
Hi, I'm Elisabeth Dana. I am based in the Netherlands, where I dedicate my practice to the intersection of sexuality, trauma, and pelvic care. So I really work with clients who face issues and challenges and questions on all three of these pillars most of the time, which is also why I'm incredibly excited to dive into this topic today of when sex is painful, and not just discussing how challenging that is, but also really, sort of weaving together ideas and experiences and solutions for coming back towards pleasure. So my clients experience or have experienced traumatic situations very often in the pelvis, but also, so you can think of sexual trauma or birth trauma, for example. But it's also very clear that many different types of trauma, whether or not pelvic in nature, affect the situation in the pelvis. So tension and challenges in the pelvic area are very often connected to trauma and chronic stress. So I'm really looking forward to what we are going to carve out today with all of these beautiful experts gathered here together. And I am very thankful for Harmony, again, for organizing these beautiful salons.
Yay. Okay, great. So lastly, I'm Aurora. I'm an integrative sexual and pelvic health therapist and the founder of Rebloom Therapy. And I offer coaching and therapies in intimacy and embodiment, fertility and reproductive health, and the journey of motherhood. And I really specialize in pain and intimacy, specifically vaginismus, supporting individuals to break free from vaginismus, to say goodbye to the pain, the anxiety, the shame and the fear that comes around penetration, so that they can have the intimacy and pleasure and relationships that they really deserve. And in my fertility work, I offer fertility charting education, as well as support for pelvic pain conditions such as endometriosis, adenomyosis, pelvic congestion, pelvic venous disorders, really working as well in fertility coaching for pregnancy preparation, both for natural conception and IVF pathways. And again, like Kate here, beautiful, I have a real passion in supporting those on their fertility journey that have experienced previous pregnancy loss, and supporting them as they continue that journey. And I began as a background in bodywork and therapy, so I also offer a wide range of mainstream therapeutic massage and bodywork, but I specialize in pelvic and fertility continuum care. Super passionate about bringing circulatory flow to the pelvis, really for treatments from menarche to menopause and in trauma recovery. And I guess, yeah, really it's about safety, connection for my clients. So I'm excited for us to dive into these questions. And the first question that we have is, how does physical or emotional pain impact our ability to experience sexual pleasure? I'm going to say it again because I said it fast. So, how does physical or emotional pain impact our ability to experience sexual pleasure? Who would like to start us off in the conversation? Yeah, Fanny, go.
Thank you. There is a lot of things to say about this, but one of the main, in my opinion, is how it creates a withdrawal of the connection towards yourself, and how suddenly you create a new normal where you actually don't listen to what you feel, the new normal of feeling of having less that what you feel you want or deserve. And this withdrawal, this new normal, actually brings you to this numbness that can go towards many parts of your whole life experience. And how, because pain actually dials down your capacity to feel pleasure, what you have available to experience life overall decreases as well, because we cannot selectively numb. So it's about limiting our capacity to pleasure, but also limiting our capacity to feel alive, in a sense.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think that's such a common experience for our clients. So yeah, Freya.
Yeah, I'm thinking on quite a general level in working with couples that physical pain in sex is like any other physical pain, in that if something causes us physical pain or something makes physical pain worse, then we don't want to do it. We avoid it. It's not something that we get very enthusiastic about. And it sounds quite basic, but there is a moving away from things that hurt, things that are painful, things that cause us discomfort. And I think with emotional pain, there's something similar, although not quite so straightforward, but, with some of these really big emotions like rage and fear and grief and shame, these are also painful states to confront. That's what is coming up for you in sexual intimacy. And of course, it's not like that for everybody, because many people are also managing emotional pain through sex and sexual pleasure. When people become addicted to sex, or addicted to anything else for that matter, and addictions are usually about trying to avoid emotional pain, or managing emotional pain, or numbing emotional pain. So there are all sorts of ways that we are dealing with our pain. Some of those ways are going towards sex, but often around addiction and avoidance, then we may get into some kind of unhealthy pattern or vicious cycle. But in less unhealthy relationships, it may just be the difficulty if we don't know how to face these emotions, and many couples don't know how to deal with those emotions. So great when reaching out for support, but when just dealing with it together, it can mean a loss of sexual intimacy.
Thank you, Freya. Yeah, Kate.
Freya left off right where I wanted to start, which is about how pain in sex affects intimacy. So pain and pleasure, I do want to speak to that, but pain and intimacy, there's an avoidance of any pain, right? If you are in pain, and particularly if that pain gets worse with sex, whether in the moment, like sex itself is painful, or after the fact, because you're suffering, say, chronic infections, which are set off by having sex, there is such an understandable wish to withdraw from that. And I recommend withdrawing from that. But there's this other damage that happens where often because we're embarrassed that we have to withdraw from sex, or it's hard to talk about, or the emotional levels of it are not easy to communicate with our partner, we end up withdrawing from our partner as well. And so it's this incredible feedback loop of it hurts, so I withdraw, but not just from the thing that hurts, from the person with whom I was hurting. And because of that, I start to shelter against pleasure of other sorts, remote pleasure on other parts of the body, like touch, like beautiful kissing, like breast massage. And without the pleasure, the body braces more, the pain gets worse. And so we can get stuck in this downward spiral. One of the things I really believe in, both from my own experience with pain and also from my work with others who are experiencing it, is that there is some healing, some turning around of the cycle to be made by finding pleasure that is safe, pleasure that's not going to exacerbate the problem, pleasure that is pure and not tied to the pain in the pelvis. So that might mean leaning into your partner and asking for a hug, asking for a massage, asking for a remote touch. It might mean knowing for sure where the breaks are, with like a very strong boundary around the painful area, just to build more trust in the body and trust in the relationship again. And I think it can be really supportive, but it's not where we naturally go. Pain naturally shuts us down to many kinds of pleasure. So we really have to seek it ourselves.
Thank you, Kate and Elizabeth.
Kate just phrased that so beautifully. And this question is also for me always an invitation to look for, hey, what is the reason of pain? Why is the pain there? What is the cause of this pain? And many times it's purely addressed as a physiological thing, which I think, by the way, is a very important starting point. So lack of lubrication is an absolutely key reason why this happens. Insufficient turn on is a really, really important reason why pain happens very often, as well as pelvic floor tension. And this is also where both the emotional and the physical components of pain are actually so deeply intertwined. So if you are dealing with severe emotional pain, wherever in your system, it might be really hard to get to a place of full turn on, where your entire internal structure actually gets ready for full arousal, for sex and penetration in many cases, which is a whole different discussion, by the way. There's a huge focus on penetrative sex in the discussion around pain during sex. But because we know that people who are listening to this probably have that as their ultimate goal, so let's mention that for sure. There are also so many other reasons why pain during sex might occur. And Aurora, you already mentioned vaginismus, which is obviously another example of that interplay of physical and emotional pain during intimacy, right? And then there is a whole range of medical reasons, ranging from, physical injury or physical trauma, infections, and other underlying conditions, etc. But I think that regardless of what the first starting point of the pain was, the lack of arousal, and especially something called premature penetration, such a beautiful term coined by Sherry Winston. Sometimes I feel as a person working with pelvises. I want to tattoo that term on my forehead so that the women that I work with and the men that I work with really learn how impactful premature penetration is. And premature penetration really points to these underlying dynamics of women and people with vaginas really feeling so much pressure to always be ready to receive something during sex. So really this whole idea that a woman should just always be ready, everything, all she needs to do is open her legs and she would be ready to go. It also really points to these cultural myths that pain is normal and that we should just live with it. The number of really young women I have in my practice, around 18, 19 years old, that come to me and explain to me that every single one of their friends, their female friends, is having painful sex, and that is normal, is absolutely shocking. So I think that there is, you know, a combination of emotional and physical factors, and also very deeply ingrained cultural dynamics that really give so much floor to pain during sex being so common. And even though it is so common, many women feel very lonely in this. They really feel that they are the only ones that must be suffering from this. And yeah, with that whole dynamic of this threat cycle, right? So pain is perceived as a threat by the brain, and then the system shuts down. It's incredibly hard and very entangled to start, chipping off all of these different pieces that both feed and cause emotional and physical pain during intimacy. So there's a whole lot more to unpack there, but let's move to someone else for now.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so much goodness there, and I think it is really important that we actually mention just how much that impacts on intimacy. So, Garisha, I think you're.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to also start with the sexual pleasure. You know, how when we can feel sexual pleasure, why in which case we are doing okay, you know, with this. With when I feel okay, I'm feeling confident in my body. I know what makes me pleasure in my body, and I'm open to feel pleasure and allow to receive pleasure. And the pain, when the pain is coming, then I start to, close myself. I start to contract in my body. And also, as you mentioned, that the pain could be so many different ways in different parts of our body. It could be also chronical or just in the moment, especially in the pelvic area. But it could be, for example, I also have clients with high blood pressure and also headaches and crampy menstruation. So it absolutely affects on how we can be there, how we can really present in the intimate moments. And the physical pain, I think it's more tangible than when we are talking about emotional pain, because most of the time that we are not aware that emotional numbness or emotional pain could affect on our sexuality. And so if there is any physical pain in my body, that I have this contraction, I start kind of like it drain me down. There's this downward spiral is coming down. I start to close myself, and I start not to feel, and I don't want to go there because it's so painful. So I really want to be start to be avoidance, and this process could lead me to disconnection. And in this process, my inner critic could start, whether, self-doubt, whether there is any problem with me, I'm not able to do this, maybe pleasure is not for me, or I don't deserve it. And all of this could come from the my ancestral lineage, and also from this feminine collective that we pleasure is not for women, or we cannot enjoy our beautiful body and also the source of the fountain of pleasure. And maybe we didn't talk about with my mom, with my granny, and I don't know whether the pain is normal. And I start to believe in this process that my body is not capable. There is a problem with me. And also this the reaction towards myself and or my partner is started rejecting my partner. I'm not initiating, or I'm rejecting the initiation of my partner, or I find excuses, or I start to fake that I'm enjoying because I want to please my partner. And but all of this starts to also create not just this connection from myself, but also from my partner. And I start to feel also lonely in my relationship, or maybe I'm choosing to be alone because I started to myself my worthiness and my self trust starts to decrease. So I think this is absolutely a downward spiral which we need to find a way. And most of the time, and that's why this conversation is really important, because so many women are struggling with this. So they need to feel, and they need to hear that they are not alone, and it's not normal. So the normal is that we can find a way how we can get over of the pain, and it's not normal that we need to suffer by pain. Thank you.
Thank you, Garisha. Harmony.
It's such a privilege to hear all these deep perspectives. I'm learning as much as I'm here to offer. I want to address something more personal. So the question was, how does physical or emotional pain impact our ability to experience sexual pleasure? And what I've noticed in my work, my own healing journey, and with my clients is it's usually a combination of things. And that's why it can be so frustrating, is because normally a woman will go to her doctor or consider like there's something wrong with me, right? Because there's a physical manifestation, but then there's the emotional aspect, and then there's spiritual or ancestral aspect. So there's this weave of how these things present, and it can be incredibly difficult to sort through it and frustrating, and people don't know where to turn first. And usually when you go to your doctor, they're like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. They gaslight you, or they're like, oh, it's this issue, and then they'll give you either a pill or some kind of a medical intervention, which is not going to address. It might even make it worse, right? And of course, that's the place to start, is we want to see, is there an infection? Is there something physically wrong with us? Of course, that's the place to start. But that's often where women's journey ends. And then the answer is like, oh, I just have to live with this. So in my own journey, I experienced sexual assault when I was I was 4 years old. And so that manifested in an emotional injury, a traumatic injury to me that caused my body to shut down. And so until I was my late 30s, in all of my relationships, I never enjoyed sex. I was unable to orgasm or experience much pleasure. I was completely numb and shut down. And as other people have already discussed, it just impacted me so deeply. I just felt so unworthy of love. I felt like I was broken. It brings emotion even today, how much I suffered and there was nothing physically wrong with me. And yet the manifestation of that was a complete inability to enjoy sexuality and to enjoy my body on that level, even though I was an athlete and embodied in many other ways, and I was open to pleasure in other ways. That part of relationship meant that then I doubted my ability to be a partner. I doubted my ability to be a mother. And I even turned away from that path because I thought I was so disconnected from my body. And so it wasn't until I started dealing with the emotional traumas that had laid in my physical system and started finding tools and teachers who could help me reconnect and re-love and slow down and not just see myself as a tool for pleasure, but like what's really here. So what I use as my guiding principle is that pain is an invitation to listen to our bodies and to get curious and to love ourselves more deeply. And there's also the ancestral piece that has been spoken to. I think it's fantastic to remember that as embryos, we were in our mother's bodies when she was an embryo, when she was an egg in her mother's body. So we have, like literally in our DNA, we have ancestral memory of whatever physical traumas or shutdowns our grandmother had, our mother had, and then we have. And so it's literally in the cells of our bodies. So sometimes women come to me like, I don't understand what's going on with me. And when we backtrack, it's actually nothing that they've experienced in their lifetime. It's something that was passed on to them through their ancestral lineage. And that can sound really woo-woo, but it's my lived experience and it's my clients' lived experience. So I just wanted to offer that it's important to look at the weave of our life and to find someone who can help you unravel that, because it's so individual, like a fingerprint. And we're all so unique that we all need different doorways in to rediscover our pleasure.
So beautiful and very necessary. And I think it really talks to that kind of biopsychosexual model that so many of us use in Vita practice as well. Marianne?
Yes. So I totally like there's so many wisdom already has been said on this first question. And I would like to just share that I totally agree with like there's so many layers, there's so many things that are woven in when it comes to the emotional pain and the physical pain and how it's impacting, our experience of sexual pleasure. And I have a lived experience, but also from my clients, that many of my clients come and they're like, they don't understand, like, why am I experiencing this? Or why am I suddenly feeling shut down in my sexuality? And I don't understand because I haven't had any sexual trauma in the past. So why am I suddenly experiencing pain? And I think it's like, it can be like, all the things that we talked about now, but also there can be so many little things of what we said, the premature penetration, but it was okay, like it was actually fine. So there was no problem there. But when they're all piled on top of each other, the body starts to like read it as like a bigger trauma in a way. And I think that a lot of women don't recognize that all those little things that might have happened, like, slap on the bum when we were, dancing somewhere, or like all these kind of little things that can still have an impact, but we are taking them like we're, how do you say that, shoving them under the carpet, like, oh, that was nothing, it was fine. And also that because they don't understand like why they are experiencing this, they also don't understand like, how can I fix it then? Like, how do I actually, how can I experience that pleasure again? And I think this is also where, because they feel like I don't know what happened to me and I don't know how to fix it, that they really feel lost. They don't know where to go. Like what some of you said, like, I can go to my home doctor. I don't know how you call it in English. I forgot the name. And they basically tell you, yeah, it's between your ears, or it's like, you have to live with it. I've had candida yeast infections, which are creating a lot of burning sensation, a lot of pain. So intercourse can be very problematic from this. And they were chronic. They will come every couple of weeks. I would have them again. And just recently, I found out that it's got nothing to do with yeast infection. Actually, it's tightness of the pelvic floor, which the body is mimicking a yeast infection. And if doctors don't know this, or they just tell you, well, some women just have that, you just have to live with it. That's really painful to hear that, and to, like, if you take that on and then you just believe the doctor and tell yourself like, okay, I just have to live with this. There's no cure for this. Some women just have it. So you're basically telling yourself, okay, I'll have to live with the pain. I'll have to deal with the pain. Well, now I know that there's so many ways that we can, change this, like going to the right pelvic floor therapist that actually knows about these things and tells you how to relax your body, and that if there's emotional trauma where that came from, that got nothing to do with like being raped or something like that. It can be something completely different, but it has an impact on your body. And if we don't know that, if we don't talk about it, then we don't know how to fix it, and we don't know how to, where to go to allow us to actually give ourselves the permission to experience sexual pleasure. And I think that's why what we are doing is so important. So women will understand, like, okay, there is a way out, and there's actually a solution. There's actually people out there who know about all the things that I'm struggling with and how to fix this, how to get this pain out of my body and to be able to experience pleasure again. So I'm celebrating us. Absolutely.
Thank you, thank you. I'm celebrating us too, and I think collectively from all of your shares, it's really clear how isolated a personal experience of pain can be, and just how multi-layered and polyvocal it is in our experiences. And I would love to talk a little bit to some of that. So I would love to talk about acute pain, chronic pain, and kind of central sensitized pain. So firstly, I think it's really important that pain and pleasure are not opposites on a linear scale. I think it's really important for us to understand this as coaches. They are complex, interwoven experiences, and they are processed by the same biological systems. Pain and pleasure share intimate pathways with all of our systems, your nervous system, endocrine system, the muscular systems. Nothing in the body works alone, gets injured alone, heals alone, right? And so understanding this helps us to see just how dynamic that experience is, how this is a conversation, right, that regulates physiological functions in adaptive and continuous process. And so to really understand that, I think it's important in the science to see that there is no one pain center in the brain or in the body. We tend to think of pain as an output, like I knocked my arm and the output is my pain, the pain in the local tissue. But actually, it's incredibly significant to understand that pain is a multi-system, multifactorial input. It is constructed by elements, your nerves, your immune cells, chemicals. And one of the things that one of my pain teachers, Steve Haynes, shared with me that I find very valuable to share with clients is that all of these elements interact by creating systems of action, attention, memory, and emotion. And this is why it hits, right? This is why we feel it so intensely, because it meets every single experience of who we are and who we have been and who we are becoming. And it's really good to share that with clients because I think it validates this kind of the breadth of their experience. And it's also why we can't measure pain, right? There's no one way to measure pain. It's our client's pain is all of these elements combine, and their experience of that is the processing in their nervous system. It's unique to them on that biopsychosexual level. And I think that's why the word integrative to me in my therapies feels so important, because it really necessitates an integrative approach. We have to be able to understand just how the breadth of what pain does. And let's talk about like acute pain and then chronic pain and this central sensitization. So we need acute pain. Say I've broken my arm, right? My nociceptors, the sensory receptors responsible for detecting harm, are going to be on high alert to keep me safe. It's going to be no good for me to bang my arm across the table, right? Ouch. And this is really good. We need this. It makes sense. There's a rational kind of perspective to it. But acute pain shifts when we move into chronic pain, and it's really, really interesting because what happens in chronic pain is that it's mostly always down to faulty wiring. And I think this is where everything intersects, right? So this is where we have that remembrance of action, attention, memory, emotion, all of those, the chronic inflammation that leads to this global and systemic sensitization. And from a kind of a neurophysiological standpoint, like I work specifically like with the pelvis in that way, but this repeated inflammatory stimulation actively alters our pain processing pathways over time. This means that pain shifts from a kind of a peripheral understanding to a central sensitization. And this is where things can get so messy and challenging for our clients, for ourselves, because it's so interwoven in these pathways. And actually, when the pain in the spinal kind of cord in these kind of receptors ways, the gateways get kind of left open, because pain is high value. Because your brain, your body is all the time asking, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? As coaches, we really love to share, you are designed for pleasure, right? And it's so true. You are wired for pleasure. There are so many beautiful ways that you are wired for pleasure. But ultimately, it isn't pain that is the opposite of pleasure. It is safety. Because your brain will always prioritize, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And when these kind of the fibers for pain, these overlapping systems that track all of the time in terms of response to your touch, response in intimacy, in arousal, because pain is high value, pleasure kind of gets usurped in a way, right? And then the brain amplifies these signals, the body amplifies. And this is when even neutral or pleasurable stimuli can become painful. This is really key for our clients in terms of experiencing arousal pain in intimacy. Because there are these shared pathways, this overlap means that it's very, very hard to distinguish pain and pleasure because they're not separate. They are using the same pathways, and that high value signal of pain will dampen everything else. Pleasure, I don't think, is opposite to pain, and it's definitely in reclaiming pleasure. It's not just about overcoming pain. It's about how do we restore the pathways and the gateways to pleasure through retraining the nervous system, re-educating the neuromusculature, kind of the patterns in the pelvic floor, restoring the physiological imprints and conditions in which arousal, desire, and pleasure can be remembered, can be breathed and moved to flourish again. And I think that's really important in terms of not just in pain, but in our coping mechanisms with pain in terms of dissociation, numbness. So yeah, I think that's when pleasure becomes profound, because it brings us from intentional pleasure, really gives us new experiences in the nervous system. And that is what makes intentional pleasure so important and valuable if you are on your journey to heal the pathways of pain, close up the gates of kind of that the volume of high intensity of pain, and access these new pathways through the forest to restore. Okay, I think we should move on to question 2.
Thank you so much, Aurora, for that beautiful in-depth sharing. And let's move on. So the question is, and we've been discussing parts of this already, but I'd love to hear from you about what role safety and nervous system regulation play in pain and in pleasure. And maybe from your experiences, from client stories, from your own wisdom, you'd like to share a little bit about that. Go ahead, Kate.
So I would like to share about this from my own experience with pain in my body. There was a period of my life when I had lichen sclerosis, which is an autoimmune disease of the vulva. And it took me years to figure out that I had that. And in the meantime, what I would experience is this intense itching. So bad I thought I was going to have to not work. Like so bad I thought I was not fit to be in public. And then the pain was like 1,000 paper cuts on the fourchette anytime that I would try to have sex. It advanced to the point of open ulcers on the vulva. It is really a gnarly disease. It is an autoimmune disease. And that means it is responsive. It is basically your inflammation system that is like gathering the alarm and sending an attack, but attacking your own cells. Now, I threw everything I had at this. I saw every expert. I definitely went the medical route, but steroids don't really agree with me. And during that time, I did try everything and everything helped a little bit. But the thing that made me stop having outbreaks all the way, and I have not had any of this pain in years now, the thing that made it stop was identifying what in my life was stressing me out so much. Now, I have lived a stressful life in that I am a stress bunny. I am. I'm a stress bunny. I respond to my world as though like, all the time. And then I had this horrible loss happen. And so I had the stress of grief on it, but I couldn't change that. I can't change my disposition. I can't change that my baby died, but I can change that I had a job that was making me sick. So nervous system regulation, sometimes we can change our environment to change our nervous system. And that is what I ultimately did. I ultimately left a job that I loved, but was making me sick. There are lower hanging fruit than overhauling your entire life. So for example, when I'm stressed, my breath rate is fast and shallow and high in my chest. I am missing out. That is activating breath. I am missing out on stimulating my vagus nerve, on blood flow to the pelvis by not taking deep breaths. Deep breaths are really hard to do when you're in a state of activation. Nervous system soothing exercises can get me into one of those upward spirals where, all of a sudden I can breathe easy and deep. All of a sudden my breath is aiding the flow of lymph in my body, is telling my body, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe, instead of, so I can turn it around through nervous system regulation. I love vagal toning exercises for anyone who is suffering from painful sex or from pain in the pelvis for any reason. What it is, I always have I require that my clients first look around and say, am I safe? Like really, imminently, am I safe right now? Because I don't ever want to gaslight the nervous system. It's there for a reason and it is very wise. But if I look around and I say, I'm in my room, I'm safe, like to the end of the hour, everything's going to be fine, even if I don't do anything important right now. And then to do a nervous system regulation exercise. We can do that with breath, for example, long, slow exhales. I love humming. I love singing for this. We can do it with self-massage. One of my favorite places to get at the vagus nerve is right here, right from the ear down the neck. And I can play with it. I can move it, or I can get, I don't have it here, but a vibrating massager, and then I don't have to work so hard. I just buzz my neck and it will calm me down. So amassing a bunch of nervous system regulation exercises can help me step down my nervous system. And if I do it over and over and over again, I can begin to recalibrate. Sometimes though, the message from the body is clear and it is telling you, Kate, there is something really wrong and you're ignoring it. It's time to look at it. And then sometimes you still have to overhaul your life. But start with the low-hanging fruit. Start with the nervous system regulation to see if you can't turn that downward spiral into an upward spiral. Relax the tissues, calm the nervous system, calm the immune system, and see if the body can heal.
Thank you for that, Kate. That's a beautiful introduction to how the nervous system is so crucial in dealing with pelvic pain. Absolutely. And let's move to Maria.
Yes. So I wanted to tap into what Kate was just saying about how the stress is really impacting. And what I experienced myself, I was mentioning candida yeast infections before, is that I've had quite a lot of very big traumatic events in my life. But doesn't really matter what they were, but they were quite big events that got nothing to do with sexuality. As a young child, I discovered my own sexuality, or I was already very sexual as a very young child. Some kids, they discover their clitoris and they love the pleasure. So I was one of those. Later on, I discovered that inside my vagina, there were spots too that gave me pleasure. And you mentioned the vagus nerve and how that's like helping to regulate the nervous system. So I accidentally discovered that cervical orgasms were bringing me peace. And that helped me to feel safe. It helped me to feel regulated, helped me to feel calm. And then when I became teenager and started to experience with boys, I kind of like gave that power away to men. I got stressed out also about boys and dating and all these things. And that's when the candidate infection started to actually happen. And I think because as a child, I could regulate my nervous system through the cervical O's. And later on, I didn't do that anymore. And I'm helping a lot of women struggling with similar problems. What I also notice is that they're looking for huge sensations, like when it comes to pleasure. And I always tell them, like, you first need to slow down. It's all about slowing down. Like when you feel safe in your nervous system, you breathe differently, like Kate said. So that's where you also slow down. So slow down, breathe deeper, and focus on those subtle sensations, because that's where it's starting. And a technique that I also teach them is the havening technique, like where you just do this gentle brushing over your arms, which is, you can do it anywhere, or even like with your hands, you can just touch yourself in that way, but really also there, focus on the subtle sensations. How does it feel when you're stroking your own face really slowly, or when you're doing that havening technique over your arms, or when you're just gently rubbing your hands. And I think that's where women start to make the shift of like, oh my God, I can actually relax my body. I can actually lean back and feel safe enough in my own body with myself to surrender and then feel subtle sensations of pleasure. And that's where it can start to grow again. And I think this is also something, that we get, like, it needs to be like fireworks and you need to be moaning and screaming to get to that pleasure. But I think you need to come back to that, to slowing down and then starting with the subtle sensations, and then everything will start blossoming. Yeah.
Beautiful, Marion. Thank you so much for bringing that piece of how crucial it is to slow down to facilitate that healing process. Beautiful. Yeah. So Freya, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. And I think when I think about safety and nervous system regulation for couples, coming to couples therapy with a lack of intimacy, and usually one or both of them having trauma, I would say that it's really foundational. It's difficult to do the work without safety, which starts in the sessions for many of my clients. Without that initial feeling of safety, it's really hard for them to even get going with the work, which is why it's helpful to have an introductory call for them to feel into whether a practitioner is somebody that they could open up to. Very often couples are not talking about why they want couples therapy if it's around intimacy. And most of my client work is around intimacy, and specifically not having sexual intimacy. So they might not even mention that until some way into the therapy. And then when the subject arises, it needs to be held with such care and such respect, because it's such a vulnerable area for couples to be able to share about, to put words to. And sometimes, actually very often, couples are not talking about this with each other because they have become so withdrawn or so frightened or so anxious, so scared to broach the subject. They've come to therapy because they know they need help. They've stopped having sex, but they are not talking about it. They've just begun to withdraw and separate and disconnect and become so isolated and lonely in their partnership. And they don't know how to reconnect. They don't know how to have the conversation. There's too much fear to be able to even broach the subject, too much fear for the words to come to them. They may fantasize about having a conversation, but actually having it's too much. So it first happens in the therapy. And this therapeutic space, it's so important for the couple to be held safely and through nervous system regulation. I will start that right from the get-go with making that transition from all that went before into the session through meditation, breath work, helping them to really settle their nervous systems. And most sessions, we have some element of creating that safe, calm environment for them. And with the Imago dialogue, one of the things I love about the method and the Imago dialogue itself is that it really is helping to create a safe container for those conversations to start happening. And once the conversation starts, once the communication starts, and the couple can begin to feel safe and their nervous systems are regulating, and there I teach them how to co-regulate, to regulate with each other. All the dialogues, we have this process of attunement to begin with through eye contact, physical contact, and synchronized breaths together. And this is what creates this foundation of safety to begin to even start talking about pain and pleasure in sexual intimacy. And I have to say that it's really important to keep that going because, oftentimes trauma responses that can come up in therapy when couples have their defenses come up, they have their buttons pushed, their defenses arise, and then they are going into one of the 4 Fs: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And particularly if it's fight and there's an angry response and one of the partners gets very angry, I find it helpful to see that as a trauma response. And if the safety isn't there for them to reconnect, try to help them to co-regulate with their partner, really spending a lot of time and helping them to feel that safety, then they're gone. They can walk off in the session, or they'll never come back. There'll be an email that they've changed their minds. So for me, this safety and nervous system regulation is key. It's foundation. It's so important to set that up around sexual intimacy issues.
Thank you, Freya, for reiterating that, and also for stressing the importance of really handling this topic with so much care, with so much gentleness. What you're sharing, it really points to the amount of shame and the amount of loneliness and isolation that is surrounding this topic. And it's beautiful that you mentioned that too. Thank you. So I see Fanny has her hand up.
I love this wisdom of this conversation. Thank you, everyone. There's something I'd love to add. One of the nervous system regulation technique that I love is EFT. So it's emotional freedom technique, basically tapping on a few set of points as you're talking out loud, talking about what bothers you and bridging that with I love myself, I accept myself, and I forgive myself. which can feel a little bit challenging at the beginning. But what the miracle that it does, at least what it does for me and what it has done for my clients as well, is how, because you're working on that, you're doing the set of points, there's almost this like self-hypnosis thing that is going on. And suddenly you notice things that you didn't expect to be here. Because you're processing the pain, suddenly the emotion might come up and you might understand that there's shame around it, but from a specific situation, or that it creates a sadness that is deeper than what you expected. Or there is this longing for intimacy and pleasure that you thought was suppressed because because things have been going on for like that for a while. And I think these technique, and especially EFT, it's really a way to go deeper. As many of you mentioned at the beginning, there is also the why that we have to understand about having the pain. Sometimes we can understand and sometimes we cannot. And just figuring out with these technique, and especially with this magic tool, because it really helps, at least it helps me and my coachees really come back to this safety again and again, without, also because sometimes it's helpful to have something that feels automatic and not, I am in a challenge right now, let me focus on the pleasure on my hands and things like that. I know that when my nervous system is on fire, just the idea of like, okay, let's get back to my hands isn't working. Whereas just tapping on the side of the hand first to just defocus and come back towards the place where I can think again is really helping me in a way that no other tool has before, especially because of the depth of your own wisdom that it allows you to access, because your mind is used to do the thing, and suddenly you have access to another wisdom that is so deep, in my opinion. So yes, near regulation play in pain and pleasure, and also in understanding why and getting more depth into how you play with it.
Beautiful, Fanny. Thank you so much for pointing that out. And I love that in this conversation, we're really sharing all kinds of nuggets and also practical tools and things that people can start trying to help calm their nervous system, or to help, as you put it so beautifully, to sort of unfocus from the pain and to come back to center and to come back to a different place inside yourself from which you can take your next action. Thank you for sharing that. Girisha, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. And I also am so excited that we can see from different points of view, and we are going to the same direction to really how to regulate our nervous system and find this safety is a key of in our society. And most of the time we are looking for, and I usually am asking what safety means to you. The answer mainly outside and material things. And in our work, it's the beauty that we are helping ourselves and our clients to create a much deeper meaning of safety, and also the feeling of safety, how we can create and connect safety in a different way. And all of us experience somehow shame, abuse, or trauma in different ways, which is absolutely disconnected from us, ourselves, to feel safe in our body. And I haven't worked with any of my clients who experience that kind of safety when we can, like a resource in our body, when we can always coming back to that resource. And no matter how, we are unbalanced in a moment, that we can always come back. And it's not the same when I'm saying that, the safety is like I have a job, I have home, I have relationship, family. Then it's always a kind of like dependency or maybe addiction to really lean on to safety from outside. And the other thing, I feel it's important to create this resource inside in our body, because we are so much stuck in our head. and we are disconnecting from the rest of our body. And we need to also connecting and creating safety in our body. It's a kind of like slowing down because so much busyness in our to-do list and also in our head. And with slowing down and relaxing and taking a break and coming in silence is so scary. And most of the time, we are not giving enough importance to that because it's like kind of like wasting our time because our time is really precious. But a lot of things and also openness could be created in this spaciousness, in this slowing down, and in this safety environment. When I can create for myself, I can create with my partner. And in the room, as Kate mentioned at the beginning, that it's an acceptance, it's an unjudgmental space towards ourselves and to others. And I think this is very important these days that, creating this kind of space. And when we are not in this space, when we can feel safe in any way, then a large system to our nervous system, there is some kind of like danger. And this is how we can absolutely coming home and feel safe when we can send this message that everything is okay. And also maybe just a hug to ourselves, just slowing the touch, slowing our movements, and also coming into stillness could also really, really help to create more safety. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Girisha, really pointing to, further tools and to really deepen that sense of safety inside ourselves, especially finding resources in the body to really increase that internal sense of safety as a beautiful basis for healing. Yeah. Harmony, would you like to pick up?
Everything that's been shared so far is so wise. And I wanted to add on to the idea of how do we create more safety, because as we've all discussed, like this nervous system regulation, creating this safety inside is so key to begin to unravel what's really going on. And I wanted to talk about the window of capacity in our nervous system and really starting to get more conscious about when we get pushed over into pain or numbness, and understanding how to bring ourselves back into like that middle zone where we are not dysregulated, right? So this becomes a practice of attunement. It's so much more helpful to have a guide, a support to help you recognize when you get out of your window of capacity, when you start breathing, like Kate was describing, like breathing in her chest or coming into numbness or the pain flares up. But a lot of this work, once we have some foundational pieces, we can learn ourselves. And it's so important to reclaim our sexual sovereignty. I think for women, so much we've turned our sexual power over to others, to our partners, to our doctors, even to the pain or the dysfunction itself. We feel powerless. And so learning how to master your own nervous system is so key to creating that safety and reclaiming our power. And a lot of that is looking outside of sexual pleasure. It's about learning that there's so many different ways we can give ourselves that sense of safety, of calmness, of regulating your nervous system, things that have already been discussed, breath work, EFT, pleasurable food, talking to a friend, long hugs, touch, self-touch, so many ways, like hacking our oxytocin, really learning how to stimulate our own hormonal system so we can create that safety in our body. I loved how Freya described how she holds clients in her sessions, and it was really resonating for me because I was like, yes, she's such a masteress and I do all those things too. And it's so important that we're holding our clients and going so slow. One of my things that I offer my clients is only go as slow as you can feel. Yeah, if you go into pain or you start numbing out, it's like slow down, come back to something that you can feel, that can feel pleasurable, and always titrate into when we're trying to expand our capacity, our window of capacity of our nervous system, we always want to come back to something pleasurable, whether that's a hot bath or singing or taking a walk in nature or playing with our animals or hugging our children. So important to also put a container. I talk with my clients, when I have a couple and they're having issues around their sexuality, is to actually remove penetrative sex from the table for a set amount of time. That can feel really helpful to just say, hey, we're going to remove that option for 3 weeks, a month, and we're going to do everything up to that. And we discuss what that means so that it's very specific. So they're both on board and there's an agreement. And that can help the nervous system of the client who's experiencing the pain to return to pleasurable touch with their partner or self-touch without the fear that they're going to be pushed beyond their window of capacity and into the pain or into the numbness. Another piece that I really work with my women clients is self-touch. And even like, I'm going to try to keep this short, vaginal de-armoring, where they just place a finger at their introitus, for example, where there might be burning sensation, and just gently press into it and breathe into it and breathe into it and just send love, send compassion, send tenderness. As Marianne described, like we need to tune into the finer, more delicate sensations. Instead of like moving too quickly towards, I want to have pleasure, or going into too much pain, sometimes we just need to, with that first initial sensation, and just be present for it and breathe into it. And so that's just what I wanted to offer right now. It's just like slowing down, tuning into those fine things, and bringing in other sources of pleasure, whatever those mean to you individually. Is like bringing, even the question of like, how could I bring in 1% or 5% more pleasure in this moment, or nourishment? If pleasure is not your word, it could be nourishment, it could be safety, it could be satisfaction, it could be warmth, right? How could I bring in just 1% more in this situation, in this moment, and give that to yourself?
Thank you so much, Harmony, for sharing that. And I love how I'm really enjoying the alignment in this group. And I love also what you're sharing about reclaiming your sovereignty and reclaiming a sense of power. I think that's another really important piece that you're addressing here, because the women that I work with very often feel so powerless around this. And bringing that sense of power and also a sense of pleasure again from activities outside of sex can be just the right titrated way of reclaiming these spaces for yourself. Thank you so much for that. And Aurora, would you like to continue?
But kind of working with some really beautiful things that Harmony has just raised is that, how do we create self-agency in safety? So many of our clients come to us, I don't know what safety is. On a personal level, I am someone who lives with a lot of autoimmune dis-ease. I have severe hypermobility. It causes me a lot of dysfunction on a daily basis, moment to moment. And I think a part of my own personal understanding and kind of professionally is that your nervous system is not a light switch. It's not this is on and this is off. It is, you are adaptive. You are meant to be in adaptive regulation. So self-agency in safety has to also be adaptive. That means it's not fixed. Safety is not a destination. It is not something that is a one-time thing. Absolutely, can you begin to develop capacity and resources that become familiar and grow more texture and have availability to you? Absolutely. Now when I come to certain spaces in my body, there's a familiarity of having some kind of resonance and anchor into safety in that way. I think what's the most empowering thing for somebody in pain to understand is and. Such a simple, small, tiny little conjunction, but you can be in pain. And what is that 1%, like Harmony was saying? where do I also have capacity for pleasure, for safety, for some regulation? And that really comes down to a few things, which is that truly, like it's kind of been said in different ways, but you can really only go as fast as your slowest part when it comes to true sustainable change and transformation in your nervous system. And that means that connection, compassion and connection heals, communication heals, right? So I think that in terms of self-agency, like it gets to be different every time, and you have to understand that. You have to be able to appreciate, be the shapeshifter, be adaptive, allow yourself to empower safety as not this fixed thing, but as something that you are in co-creation with. And that gives you control and agency in terms of pain management, in terms of, of just being kind of center of locus. And then the other piece, I'm really briefly going to touch on this, but I couldn't not as someone who works with pelvis in this way. I just really quickly want to bring in fascia. So I work a lot with on body, in body, intravaginal work. And one of the things that I have really come to understand in terms of fascia, you know, when I first began to work with fascia, it was very much from a myofascial release, trigger point, kind of all of these kind of workings with the body. A deeper understanding that has really been developing me is that fascia is a communication highway. It is alive, 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 alive. And that means it meets you in your experiences in each and every moment. And it can be a very powerful way to not go into release with the fascia. It's not like you're like doing all of this fascial constriction work. That can happen and it can be powerful. Really what you're meeting is connection and communication. And that is the place that you can approach change in some of these constrictions. And so, yes, let's talk about the emotions, the energetics, the safety in that way, but from a very proprioceptive and physical way, let's also come to some of the physical work that can be done in order to integrate safety and pleasure from that perspective.
Thank you so much. And what really stands out to me, and I absolutely love this phrase so much, other than you addressing the fascia, which is the miracle tissue for working with pelvic pain, is to really go only as fast as the slowest part inside of you. I think that's such a beautiful mantra for all of us coaches to keep in mind, but also to really to offer to our clients, because many times the clients that we're seeing with in this situation, they just want to get this over with now. And it doesn't work like that. So thank you for pointing that out. I'd love to just offer a few more notes around the nervous system and some pieces that I feel are still important to address. I think that with this, we're going to round off for this question. So I just want to share a few more pieces, even though so much really, really wise input has already been shared around the nervous system. For us as coaches, it's also really important to keep in mind that chronic stress and trauma are just absolutely rampant across our societies. So I think it's pretty much safe to assume that the majority of the clients that come into our practices are either dealing with trauma one way or another, whether sexual or not, whether pelvic related or not, and or are facing chronic stress in their lives. The chances are incredibly high. And we know that when there is chronic stress in the body, so one thing that I always share with my clients to help them understand, like, why the hell does this happen in my pelvis, especially for clients who don't have pelvic related trauma necessarily. And I'll always explain to them how the physiology of stress works and what the role is of the pelvis in that. So I will do either one of two things. I will pretend that I'm a chihuahua, literally walking on the floor of my practice, pretending that I'm just sniffing around, and boom, there's a huge pit bull coming across the street and it's running for me, and I'm bracing all of my paws, right? Which is the shoulder girdle, which is very often as stressed as the pelvic girdle. And of course, the hind legs, when they are being tensed and braced, obviously that's where the stress in the pelvis starts. Or the other thing I'll do to illustrate it is just imagine that there is a really funny friend of yours and he's hiding just behind a corner. And just as you're walking there, boom, he comes out and tries to scare you as a little joke. You will notice, everyone knows how this feels. Everyone encounters this regularly in their life, right? So what you notice in that response, if the startled response, literally your body going up like that, your eyes widening, your whole system looking for where is the threat. But what's interesting to realize is that that very first moment of that threat response, boom, that upping of your body is initiated by the pelvis. So the very muscles of the pelvic floor are the ones that come into action first. So when there is chronic stress in the body, it's almost as if your body is in a continuous state of like, almost getting scared, right? Almost getting that moment of fright, which means that there will be continuous tension in your pelvis. So the message that many people get when they're facing painful sex is a very, very horrible one. And it's to just relax. Oh, just relax. Just relax. How on earth is that ever going to happen? Like, everybody knows how it feels, right? This is absolutely incredible and so dumb to actually say to someone who has a system that's so under stress. But knowing how this works and understanding that negative or traumatic experiences, whether sexual or not, are so important for the pelvis also really points to the need for understanding how this works when it comes to sex in terms of the linkage to arousal. So when there is a lack of safety, your body is going to brace. And when the pelvis is going to brace, the tissues, the very tissues of your muscles are tense. And that means that there is not enough blood flow in that area. There is not enough lymphatic flow in that area. So when we are inviting our clients into increasing pleasure or, trying to have all kinds of pleasurable sexual oriented activities, what we need to know first is that they can actually relax the muscles of their pelvis. So as long as blood flow is limited in the area, there is not going to be full arousal, and there is also not going to be full pleasure. And I think that this piece for women to really understand their actual intimate anatomy and how the erectile tissues inside of our pelvises is so crucial in helping or not for us to experience pleasure or to experience pain. I think this is a piece of information that is so often missing. And I strongly recommend to my clients to really dive deep into how does the anatomy of my body actually work. So other than the beautiful pieces and strategies that have already been shared, I just want to add a few more. And one is the concept of pendulation. And some of the suggestions that have come here sort of point in that direction. But when pain is so prominent in our systems and all that our amygdala and hippocampus can actually show is pain, 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 alarm, 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 to really consciously invite small experiences of pleasure and to always try and support our clients to see, okay, so you're experiencing this pain now. What else is there? What else can you notice? So what else outside the painful experience can you also experience at the same time? And this is an invitation that sometimes might be really difficult for clients because they're so focused on the pain. But you can guide them into, okay, so what do you notice now in your fingernails? What do you notice now in this little piece of your ear? There is always a part of the body that is not experiencing pain or is experiencing a more neutral state of being, and actually expanding the ability to be with sensations that are not that painful and that are actually more neutral helps expand the capacity of the nervous system to start being open and more receptive to new experiences outside of pain. And I love all the suggestions around sensuality I think that it's what's always beautiful for my clients to understand is that pleasurable stimuli, other than just sexual stimuli, can really trigger the release of pain reducing neurotransmitters like endorphins that are just so helpful. And Harmony gave some really beautiful examples of those. And it can be as simple as, dancing. And yes, it can be sexual experiences as well, but also simple sensual pleasures. Enjoying massage or touch or eating something really delicious. And I feel that this can be a really beautiful way for people to feel more empowered to start rewiring their nervous systems from just focusing on pain to really broadening their experiences as well. And I love that absolutely everyone here has somehow pointed to the need and the importance of sensuality. So engaging your senses for and opening your senses for experiences that are pleasurable one way or another, which is a highway to broadening the state of your nervous system away from only pain and as a pathway towards pleasure. There's so much more to share about this, and I can sense in the room that everybody would like to say even more because yes, this is a rich conversation. But for now, let's round this question off. And Aurora, can I give word back to you?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the depth of wisdom and the real grace that you've shared in your different perspectives and the questions. And maybe it would be really nourishing for us to just close there if that's kind of a good place, rather than jumping onto another question. Maybe popcorn really briefly and quickly. One last, what is the one dewdrop? What is the one gift of medicine that you would love to end this with? I think that might be nourishing. And just share one last little nugget, because I know you've all got gold. Kate's ready. Kate's in.
What I really want to leave everyone who's listening with is that, I was told that my problem would never go away, but it can go away. We can heal the pain, and it might be slower than we want, and it might take longer than we want, but it is possible. And pleasure and sensuality can seem like a really silly thing when we're on that path, when we're in the pain, but it's because it's so pragmatic that sometimes it can be really helpful to have an integrative, pleasure-focused support person. So wishing everyone comfort and pleasure.
I forgot to say thank you because I was cuddling myself in yumminess with that share. Okay, so yeah, Mariana, would you like to go?
Yeah, so I add on to what Kate is saying, and I think really all women are capable of experiencing pleasure. We're all capable of that, even if you don't believe in it, or if you think you're so broken that you can't have that or you can't experience that. I really believe also this woman that says I'm too broken, she can experience pleasure. And I think the golden nugget really is slowing down, because in the slowing down you can start to trust your own body again. And as I said, you said it too, Kate, it needs to take time. It's not tomorrow you will feel it. And also what a lot of my clients say, yeah, but I need to experience those very big things. I really feel come back to the subtle sensations of just noticing how it feels to just touch your own skin, and bring that slowing down in there, and tell yourself that you're capable of feeling this, and from there I think pleasure can just grow for all women. Yeah.
Beautiful. Harmony.
I want to say that it's never too late. I came to my sexual healing journey in my 40s. I'm now through menopause, and my pleasure, my capacity for love, for connection, for epic partnership just expands every moment in my life. And there are people out there, this whole panel is full of experts. I'm speaking directly to women who might be struggling with this. There's help, there's support, there's a pathway, and you can reclaim the pleasure you desire. You can reclaim your healing. it's a beautiful journey. It's a mysterious journey. And what I would suggest is to stop comparing yourself to other people, what you think is normal, and come back to what you desire. What do you desire to experience? What do you want for yourself? Sometimes it's hard to claim it for ourselves. So what would you want for your daughter, for your children? What do you desire to experience? What do you desire to see in the world? And claim that and find support, get support, and it's possible. So I just want to just really be an advocate. I know all of us are advocates for that, and to call people into claiming this path for themselves and getting curious and taking that first step.
I have two golden nuggets. Thank you for sharing all of that. First one is about it's if anybody tells you pain is normal and you should just suck it up, run. They suck. You need someone to take care of you. And we are professionals, and they are even healthcare professionals who are well trained and who listen to women. We are feminist doctors. We exist and we are creating a movement. So run from those people who just tell you to suck it up. The second one would be if pleasure doesn't feel comfortable right now, start with comfort. If just asking yourself, what do I want? I have no idea because I feel so numb and disconnected. Just what would make me feel a little bit more comfortable right now? Just 1% more comfortable, or even 0.5% more comfortable.
Love that.
Yes, our body is so magical and beautiful and wise. No matter what you've experienced before, your past doesn't determine or should determine your present and future. And there is always a solution, what you already mentioned. And pleasure is not just a bonus or an award we need to earn. It's a medicine. And also the pain could be a pathway for a deeper connection with our body. And pleasure is not a luxury, it's our birthright. Thank you.
I feel like I'm being bathed in goodness. Elizabeth.
I want to share two more things that we haven't had time to discuss in detail. I'll keep it very short. The first point that I feel is a really important nugget that is even better than gold, it's probably diamond, is the topic of boundaries. Really feeling and caring more for your own boundaries is an absolute safe way for creating more safety and a perception of safety for your nervous system and in your body. So working with boundaries as a beautiful and important starting point for releasing pelvic tension, I would say give that a go. And the other piece that I want to address is around body work. So body work that you do on yourself, but also body work with a trauma-informed body worker can be incredibly helpful in this process. So if you are looking for physical therapy or like a pelvic floor physiotherapist, make sure that they are deeply trauma informed, perhaps even somatic experiencing trained or something like that, so that you know that they will be able to titrate your experience, to take small steps, that means. And otherwise, a beautiful modality that you can look for, you can search for providers in your own country, is holistic pelvic care, which both Aurora and myself are trained in. And if it doesn't happen to be accessible for you, you can look for the work of Tammy Lynn Kent, where there are absolutely gorgeous pieces for self-body work and reconnection to your pelvis. Just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Good, Freya.
I'd like to end by speaking to couples that it's not too late for you if you have stopped having sex. Just adding to what Harmony said about not being too late in life for women and couples who are menopausal, postmenopausal, and have stopped having sex because of the problems associated with menopause, that it may seem like an option to just stop having sex. It is for very many people, and that can be a choice, but oftentimes that choice is made out of fear, shame, not realizing that these issues can be overcome with some support and the right education and tools. So I speak to couples and say, don't give up. If you can at all help it, reach out and get some support.
Gorgeous. And yeah, oh my goodness, there's so much more that we could dive into in terms of pain and intimacy. I love that you brought couples work here, because actually so much can be navigated, and being in a coupledom can be very powerful in terms of navigating pain and intimacy. You've all said so many good, beautiful pearls. I think I'm gonna end with like a word that feels delicious to me and its etymology. So soma, my favorite definition of soma is the organism in its living wholeness. Sometimes we break it down to like body, mind, spirit thing, but really it's the organism in its living wholeness. And when someone is in pain, it can feel like there is nothing beyond it, that is all there is. And I would love for us to bring that and so that we could understand that actually we are evolutionary designed. You are very well built to experience trauma, stress, pain, and have ways to process, regulate, rearrange, reorient, and come into your experience of wholeness, not by only moving away from the pain, but by coming with compassion and connection towards it in ways that you can also access the wholeness of who you are in terms of your bliss, in terms of your comfort, in terms of your pleasure, in terms of your freedom, choice, and aliveness. Thank you, thank you, thank you to each and every single one of you. Your voice is so powerful to be here. We need to have 1 million of these salons on pain and intimacy, because we got to nothing in terms of like scraping the surface, but some real richness as well. So thank you, everybody.